Mate, let's not sugarcoat this. The whole thing reeks of betrayal. The government reckons it's all hush-hush, but the cat's already out of the bag. We're talking about people who willingly ditched Australia, spat on our values, and jumped headfirst into the arms of one of the most barbaric mobs the world's ever seen, ISIS. And now, after years of playing house with terrorists, they're suddenly knocking on the door asking for a warm welcome home? Pull the other one. Aussies are fuming, and fair dinkum, who can blame them? This isn't about compassion. This is about safety, loyalty, and whether we've got the backbone to stand up for what's bloody right. Before we RIP into this government stitch-up, where ISIS brides fly back under cover of darkness, the PM swears blind it's not happening, and taxpayers are left picking up the tab, smash that like button like you're knocking back the lies they keep serving us. Subscribe if you're sick of being treated like a mug while the police sell us out. And grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo" shirt, links in the description. Picture this. You're sitting at the pub with your mates, schooner in hand, and someone says, "Oi, did you hear?" The so-called ISIS brides are being flown back, maybe even resettled next door to you. The whole joint would go silent before exploding in outrage. It's not just the thought of them coming back, it's the secrecy, the way the pollies dodge questions like they're in some circus act. Prime Minister swears blind it's not the government bringing them back, yet we've got coppers planning security ops, AFP and NSW police having closed-door meetings, and whispers about taxpayer dollars footing the bill. Pulling wool over our eyes? Too bloody obvious. And here's the kicker, these aren't innocent love-struck Sheilas swept off their feet in some rom-com fairy tale. Nah, many were full-blown combatants, waving black flags and cheering while blokes in the desert committed horrors we don't even like to picture. Kids are tangled up in this mess, sure, but let's not pretend every story's the same. Some of these so-called children are teenagers now, raised in a war zone, marinated in extremist propaganda, and no one's had eyes on them for years. You reckon they're coming back fresh as daisies? Not likely. Yet the bleeding hearts in the media lap it up, saying, we have to take them back for the children. Mate, you don't fix one problem by inviting in 10 more. Former PM Tony Abbott hit the nail on the head. These people surrendered their citizenship the second they ran off to join a death cult. You can't be all in with ISIS one year and then rock up at Sydney Airport the next, flashing your Aussie passport like nothing happened. Citizenship isn't some Netflix subscription you can cancel and restart whenever it suits you. Abbott even suggested Parliament should strip their right to residency altogether. And honestly, why hasn't that happened already? Too scared of the outrage brigade, that's why. The pollies know if they push hard on this, they'll cop heat from human rights groups and activists who've probably never had to stare down a genuine security threat in their lives. But let's get real, who actually benefits from letting them back in? Not the families of Aussies who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, risking their necks fighting the very ideology these women supported. Not the taxpayers already struggling with the cost of living crisis while their hard-earned dollars get splashed on surveillance, de-radicalization programs, and God knows what else. And definitely not the average punter who just wants to walk down the street without worrying about what's lurking behind the next corner. The only people rubbing their hands are the bureaucrats desperate to look progressive and the activists chasing headlines. Now, here's where it gets spisher. This isn't just about ISIS brides. This whole saga cracks open a bigger picture of how Australia's shifting on the world stage. While China struts around like the schoolyard bully, flexing military parades and eyeing global domination, what's a mob doing? Rolling over, playing neutral, and making decisions that leave us looking soft. Just the other day, Abbott warned that under this government, Australia's tilting towards Palestine and away from Israel, the only proper democracy in the Middle East. Imagine Bob Hawke rolling in his grave, after he once said if the bell tolls for Israel, it tolls for all mankind. That's not just a small policy tweak, that's a massive gear shift, and it's happening while hardly anyone's paying attention. And that's what makes this whole thing such a powder keg. On one hand, we've got returning ISIS brides sparking outrage at home, and on the other, we've got international alliances quietly shifting, leaving Australia stuck in the middle of a storm. You reckon it's coincidence? Or is it part of a bigger, uglier plan that no one's game to admit? Mate, the dots are lining up, and it stinks to high heaven. So, before you switch tabs or scroll on, ask yourself, why is this happening now? Why are the doors cracking open for ISIS brides at the exact moment Australia's global stance is wobbling? Why is the media so hell-bent on painting them as victims when the evidence screams otherwise? You don't need a tinfoil hat to see that something's rotten, and it's time we called it out for what it is. Alright mate, strap yourself in because we're just getting warmed up. If you thought the first part of this yarn was a bombshell, wait till we dig deeper. See, the return of these so-called ISIS brides isn't just about a plane full of women and kids landing at Sydney Airport. Nah, it's about how much our leaders are willing to gamble with the very fabric of Australia for the sake of looking compassionate on the world stage. And here's the spicy bit, it's not just about them. It's about what their return represents: weakness, distraction, and a government more interested in photo ops than in protecting the people who actually call this country home. Now, you don't have to be a political junkie to smell the hypocrisy. One minute the PM swears black and blue that the government's not involved. The next, NSW police and the AFP are running drills, making plans, even talking about where these women will be housed. How's that not involvement? It's like a bloke saying he's not drinking tonight while ordering 3 pints at the bar. Everyone can see what's going on, but the pollies reckon we're mugs who won't notice. And the kicker? We're footing the bill. The Aussie taxpayer, already stretched thin by rising rents, fuel prices that make you choke, and lettuce costing more than a pub steak, is now being asked to bankroll the security circus needed to rehabilitate people who once thought Australia was the enemy. And don't get me started on the secrecy. You notice how little detail actually gets out? No one's allowed to know which suburbs these women will end up in, who's monitoring them, or what happens if they step out of line. You've got parents across the country wondering if their kid's new classmate is gonna be someone fresh out of Syria with a backstory darker than a blackout in the bush. And yet, the government keeps saying, "Don't worry, we've got it under control." Oh really? This is the same government that can't even build a few train lines without blowing billions and running years late. But when it comes to national security, we're meant to trust them blind? Pull the other one. Here's where it gets properly controversial. The media's pushing this soft-focus narrative: the poor, innocent women tricked into going overseas, the children who did nothing wrong. It's a Hollywood SOB story written to make you feel guilty for even raising an eyebrow. But let's call a spade a spade. These aren't backpackers who accidentally boarded the wrong flight. They made a choice. Some of them doubled down, even after seeing the atrocities. And sure, kids aren't responsible for their parents' decisions, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Years of radicalization don't just vanish because you step off a Qantas flight. That kind of thinking sticks. And it's not racist or heartless to say that, it's just being honest. What's really maddening is how the conversation gets shut down. You say you're worried, and suddenly you're painted as some backwards hick who doesn't understand human rights. Human rights? Where were the human rights when Aussies were dodging terrorist threats in the CBD, or when young blokes and Sheilas signed up to fight overseas against the very mob these women supported? Funny how those human rights don't get much airtime. And now, regular families are being asked to just cop it sweet, like it's un-Australian to even raise concerns. Mate, if anything, it's un-Australian not to question it. But wait, this goes even deeper. The return of these ISIS brides lines up with another shift that should have every Aussie paying attention: the way our country is cozying up to ideas and alliances that make zero sense for our national interest. Look at China. Abbott wasn't mucking around when he said Beijing's not about remembering the past, but about showing the world who's boss. You think they parade missiles and tanks just for fun? Nah, it's about intimidation. And while China flexes, what's our government doing? Playing neutral, like some half-asleep umpire at the footy. The United States, for all its flaws, has kept the peace for decades. But under this government, we're drifting away, pretending we can sit on the fence between China and the US. Newsflash: that fence is barbed wire, and it's gonna hurt when we fall. And here's the jaw-dropper. At the very moment these women are coming back, the same government's pushing to shift Australia's stance in the Middle East. Suddenly, we're tilting towards Palestine, away from Israel, a country that, love it or hate it, is the only functioning democracy in that part of the world. John Howard and Alexander Downer didn't just issue warnings for the fun of it. They know how dangerous this shift is. If you reckon this is all coincidence, you're dreaming. It's all part of the same puzzle. Australia's losing its guts. Instead of standing firm, we're bending whichever way the international winds blow. And the timing couldn't be more sus. Now, let me chuck in a bit of good old Aussie storytelling to make this hit home. Imagine your neighbour skips town, joins a bikie gang, wreaks havoc, and then a few years later turns up at your doorstep asking for the spare room. You'd laugh in their face, right? But now swap out the bikie gang for ISIS, and suddenly the government reckons you're supposed to open your arms, smile, and welcome them back to the cul-de-sac. Mate, if it sounds insane, that's because it is. But that's exactly what's happening right now. And don't think for a second this ends with just a handful of women and kids. Once the door's open, it's open. Others will follow. Activists will argue it's cruel not to reunite more families, lawyers will sniff out loopholes, and before you know it, Australia's dealing with dozens more cases, each one more complex and costly than the last. It's a slippery slope, and it's all happening while everyday Aussies can barely afford to keep the lights on. So here's the big question I'll leave hanging in the air. If this government is willing to roll the dice on ISIS brides, lie through their teeth about the details, and cozy up to questionable international shifts, what else are they hiding? What other decisions are being made behind closed doors while we're distracted by cost of living pressures and endless chatter about celebrity scandals? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about national security, it's about trust. And right now, trust in the government's running lower than the beer taps at a dodgy RSL on a Monday night. And that, my friends, is just scratching the surface. The fire's only just started, and the next part of this rabbit hole will make today's outrage look like child's play. We're about to get into the dirty details, the backroom deals, the foreign interference, and how these decisions are shaping the future of Australia in ways most of us can't even see yet. Right, so here's where we left it hanging. The government's already lost the room, Aussies are fed up, and the trust that once held the whole show together is crumbling quicker than a servo meat pie left in the sun. And now, as if throwing open the door to ISIS brides wasn't dicey enough, the whispers about backroom deals, quiet compromises, and foreign hands pulling the strings start to sound a lot less like conspiracy theories and a lot more like reality. The timing's just too neat. On one side, you've got the brides flying in under the radar, and on the other, our foreign policy wobbling like a dodgy ladder. Put those two together, and you don't need to be Einstein to see the pattern. Think about how politics actually works in this country. You don't get shifts this big without someone leaning on the scales. The old days of straight talk are gone. Now it's all smoke, mirrors, and dodgy handshake deals. The return of the brides isn't just about national security, it's a perfect distraction. While Aussies are glued to headlines about radicalized teenagers and secret relocation plans, Parliament's quietly making decisions that'll change the way this country's aligned for decades. That's the real trick. The outrage keeps you looking one way while the deals get signed out of sight. Classic magician's act, except instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, they're pulling our sovereignty out from under us. And here's the part that'll boil your blood. There's a feeling, and it's spreading fast, that Australia's leadership isn't just bending under pressure. They're selling out. Big foreign players, whether it's Beijing flexing in the Pacific or the UN trying to strong-arm us into towing their line, see weakness and smell opportunity. Why do you reckon the government's so keen to be seen as compassionate by the international community? Because it scores them brownie points overseas. Meanwhile, back home, the average Aussie's copping higher bills, dodgier services, and a government that looks more interested in its global image than in its own people. If that doesn't feel like betrayal, what does? Now let's loop it back to something every Aussie can relate to. You're standing in the supermarket, staring at a carton of eggs that's doubled in price, wondering how you're going to stretch the weekly shop. And while you're sweating over groceries, some bureaucrats signing off millions to house and monitor women who once thought joining a death cult was a good idea. Millions that could have been spent fixing hospitals, easing housing pressures, or giving our farmers a fair go. It's not just unfair, it's insulting. Like they're laughing in your face saying, you'll pay for it and you'll like it. And this isn't just about money either. It's about the principle. When did we start rewarding bad decisions? If you or I broke the law, we'd be dragged through the courts and slapped with fines before we could say Centrelink. But if you ditch the country, join the most violent mob of the 21st century, and then decide you're sick of desert life, suddenly it's all forgiveness and fresh starts. That's not justice. That's a two-tier system where regular Aussies cop the stick, while people who actively betray the nation get the carrot. Try explaining that to a veteran who's buried his mates because of the very ideology these women supported. And here's the darker twist. Once you start letting this slide, where does it stop? You think this government will draw a line after the brides? Not a chance. The activists will push harder. The lawyers will sniff out more loopholes. Next thing you know, it's not just brides, it's fighters, sympathizers, hangers-on, all lining up to make their case. Oh, but they've changed. Oh, but they were young. Heard it all before. And if we don't slam the brakes now, we're opening a Pandora's box that no amount of taxpayer dollars or police surveillance can ever shut again. And let's not forget what else is shifting while we're distracted. Australia's tilt away from old allies and towards questionable new positions is already ringing alarm bells. You think John Howard and Alexander Downer, two blokes who've seen it all, are just bored retirees looking for attention? No, they see what's happening. A quiet, creeping drift that could leave us standing on the wrong side of history. And the scariest part? Most Aussies don't even know it's happening because they're too busy trying to keep the lights on while this government buries the truth under urgent humanitarian headlines. So here's the big picture. This isn't just about ISIS brides. It's about the kind of country we're becoming. Are we a nation that defends its values, looks after its people first, and stands firm in the world? Or are we a soft touch, always looking to score international brownie points while our own citizens get left behind? Because right now, it feels like the latter. And if we don't call it out, if we don't raise hell, we're gonna wake up one day and realize Australia's been sold off bit by bit, not with a bang, but with a shrug. Now I know some people will hear this and say, "Oi, settle down, you're just fear-mongering." But have a look around. Fear-mongering is when you make stuff up. This is happening in real time. Flights are landing, deals are being struck, and trust is being shattered. And if you're not angry yet, you're not paying attention. So let me finish with this. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking you're the problem for asking questions. Don't let them convince you that being worried about your family's safety, your tax dollars, and your country's future makes you some kind of villain. That's exactly what they want, a quiet population too scared of being called names to speak up. But Australians don't do quiet. We're a loud, rowdy mob, and when something stinks, we say so. That's what makes this country worth fighting for. See you in the next one. And don't forget to slap that like button like it just sold off your local hospital to pay for another overseas junket. Oi, and if you're really fired up, grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo" shirt. Wear it to the next rate hike meeting, the next protest, or just your local cafe when you're forking out $9 for a flat white while wondering why your tax dollars are fixing someone else's country instead of ours. Stay loud, stay awake, and never stop fighting for the Australia we bloody deserve.